Sorry about this. Something is not quite right. So if you haven't done so, please head to the website and load up Studio 0, click list 0. I'm quite literally just going to walk through this with everybody and hopefully work out any setup problems that you have so that by the time we're finished, everybody's on the same page and ready to work on the web development stuff. So the first thing that you need to do, if you haven't done so already, is signing up for a GitHub account. So you need to make an account on GitHub. I actually already have a GitHub account, so I'm just going to use that one for today. But if you haven't already signed up for a GitHub account, please go to github.com and fill out the registration form, get yourself an account. We can't do anything else until you do that step. So that is step number one. Once you have an account, you actually need to create what's called a fork of the repository. So there's a project repository that's already been created. A fork is going to basically create your own personal copy of that repository so that you can make changes to your own stuff and track your progress as you go along. So in order to do that, if we, so first step, make an account. Second step is to fork this repository. You see the link here? This will take us to the repository. And up in the corner, I can make this a little bigger. Up in the corner, you see this button that says fork. I'm just going to go ahead and click that now. And I'll put it on my personal account here. And it's taking a second to create this for us. Again, this is creating our own personal version of this repository for us to use, right? And now that I've successfully created my own version of this repository, we can move on to the next step. So let me back up to the studio here. So when we created that fork only lives online at the moment, which doesn't do us a whole lot of good. We need to pull down a copy on our local machines if we want to be able to change stuff. So that's what we're going to do next, is actually take that copy and create a version of it on our local machines. In order for us to do this, we're going to head over to our IDE, the same IDE that we've been using, the exact same one. So here's my IDE. And down here in the terminal, I'm going to go into my WebTrack directory. Oops. If you don't have a WebTrack directory, then you can just go ahead and create a WebTrack directory for you to use. I'm actually going to create one more directory. Call it, what do I want to call it? Let me check the documentation real quick. I'm going to call it Studios. So I'm going to create a Studios directory and go into Studios. And then the command that we want to grab a version of our repository is called a clone. You can see this command right here. You can see this command right here. It starts with git clone. You can actually copy paste this directly into the IDE. The only thing you need to do is, instead of jharvard, you want to change that to your account name on GitHub. Your account name is not jharvard. Your account name is whatever you created it as a few minutes ago. So go ahead and copy paste this into the terminal, which is over here, and change jharvard to whatever your account name is. My account name is Big Shake, like so. And then go ahead and execute that, and it'll tell you that it's cloning it into FlickList. That's the repository. And if I actually come over here and I look, I see I now have a folder called FlickList with all of the stuff in it. That's the same stuff that's in the repository that you just forked a few steps ago. Are there any questions so far? Let me pause here for a moment, make sure we're all on the same page. Any questions? We good? Fantastic. Yes? I just created a directory to hold the stuff, so you can call it whatever you want. I called mine WebTrack/Studios. You can put it wherever you want, as long as you remember where you put it. And then make sure to change jharvard to your username. change this to whatever your GitHub account name is. Okay, any other questions? So yeah, you can see all the files that are downloaded. There's actually some code in here. In fact, at this point, we can actually see what this is going to be doing for us. If I right-click index.html and I say preview, oh, great. That's awesome. Let me try that a different way. Sorry about that. I'll say Apache 50 start flick list. And then I'll go ahead and open up my website in the browser like I've been doing, like so. You should be able to see flick list here. This is actually the completed version of this project. This is the finished version that you guys are going to create yourselves over the next 3 weeks, right? So you can take a look at this if you want to and see how it works and kind of play around with it a little bit, get a feel for what you're going to be working on over the next few weeks. Once you're satisfied with this, once you get this up and running and you make sure that everything is working appropriately, we're actually going to set up a few more things related to our repository. The next thing that we're going to do is add what's called an upstream. So what that means is we need to create a connection back to the original form of the repository so that if we make any changes to it in the future, you'll be able to see any changes that we make. In other words, it's a very simple command. In order to do this, you actually see this command right here, git remote add upstream. It's not listed here on the studio. Git remote add upstream. We don't need to change anything about this one. This one can just be copy pasted in as is to the terminal in your IDE. And all we're doing is providing a link back to the original repository called upstream so that in the future, if we need to track changes to the original, we can do so. Oops, except I messed something up. I need to be in the flick list folder. I apologize. And now I can do it. So I went into my flick list directory. I ran the supplied command. If you want to make sure that it worked, you can run this command right here. Git remote-v will show you all of the repositories that you are currently connected to. So git remote-v shows me that I'm connected to the LaunchCode version of this repository. That means we did it successfully, right? If yours looks like this, that means you set it up properly. Any questions? Let me take another pause and make sure I'm not going too fast. Any questions before we move on? We've actually just got a couple more things we need to take care of before we can start messing around with some code. So the next thing that we're going to do, we actually just did all of this stuff. The next thing we're going to do is create a branch. And so think of a branch like this. We currently have a finished copy of the project, but we actually want to branch over to an incomplete version of the project so that we can add our own code to it. So you can think of this as being a fork in the road, like two different paths for us to take. We're currently on the completed branch. We want to be on the incomplete branch so that we can do some work. So what we're going to do first is we're going to fetch the branch from the upstream, right? So I'm going to run this command as is. I'm just going to run this command directly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. If you see this, that means it was successful. So it tells you that it's fetching from the upstream that we just set in the previous step. Then the next thing that I need to do is actually switch over to that branch, which I can do using this command right here. So this is going to create a local version of that branch on the IDE. So when I paste that command in, you see that it says it's set up to track remote branch from upstream. That means it was successful. And now if I type in git branch, I can see the different branches. There's a star next to master. That means that's the branch that we are currently on. We actually want to be on the branch called Studio 0, right? So if I say git checkout Studio 0, it'll switch me over to that Studio 0 branch, and I can tell that it worked because now inside of the parentheses here, I see it says Studio 0, right? I'm now on the Studio 0 branch. And actually, if I go back to my web page and I click refresh, you'll notice that, oh man, things have changed pretty significantly. So we've gone back to a very bare bones version of this website. You can see that nothing works. Nothing works now. Nothing works at all. So we are now at square one, and over the next 3 weeks, we'll start adding on different features and different functionality until we end up with the final version of the product that you saw. I'm going to take another pause here and see if there's any questions or anybody needs some help before we continue on. We're actually almost finished. We're actually almost done. We did that step. The final step that we're going to do is we're going to create a branch. We're going to create a branch ourselves called Studio 0 My Work. And the reason that we're going to do that is because we're all human. We all make mistakes. And if we do make a mistake, we want to be able to go back to the original version. So we're basically going to create a copy of our starting points so that in the event that we screw something up, we have a reference to go back to, right? So the final thing that we need to do is say git branch studio my work. I'll paste that into the IDE. And now if I say git branch, you'll see that we have 3 branches now: master, Studio 0, and Studio 0 my work. And the last thing that I'm going to do is check out Studio 0 dash my dash work. Oops, if I type it properly, that would help. Okay. So at this point, we are done fiddling with the repository, for today at least. Let me just give a quick review of what we did, right? We had a repository online. You created your own copy of it. You then put that copy into the IDE using a clone command. You then created a branch for Studio 0. You checked out the Studio branch so that you can start with a fresh copy for you to work with. And then finally, we created sort of an experimental branch where you can play around with without having to worry about blowing things up or making mistakes, because we have a fresh copy to go back to if we need to. Are there any questions? Any questions? So the last thing that you have to do, and I'm actually not going to do this part, but I want you all to do this part. There's 2 little to-dos that we've asked you to do to complete this studio. One of them is in index.html, so if I open up that file real quick, you'll see down at the bottom, there's a to-do that just asks you to include your flicklist.js script. So that should be very, very easy. This is not meant to be difficult. Literally just type flicklist.js in here. That's fine. Well, it'd be JS/ rather, flicklist.js, right? So hook up the JavaScript file in this script tag. The other thing that you need to do is you need to sign up for an account at the moviedb.org. That's what's going to be providing us with movie information for our project. So you need to go sign up for an account and get an API key, like we've done for other APIs in the past. And then once you have that API key, you need to go into flicklist.js and put your API key in where it says put your API key in here. That's the final task for you to complete. I'm not going to do that, but I will let you guys take care of that yourselves. And that's it. That's actually all that I have for you today. Starting next week, we're actually going to go over more concepts and work on this project. And over the next 3 weeks, we'll actually be constructing it as a group through the studios. Are there any questions for me right now? Any questions at all? If you got stuck along the way, or if you got lost, or you are just confused about what the heck we just did, feel free to flag me down. Otherwise, now would be a good time to finish up the rest of the studio and then either work on prep work, or if you have CS50 stuff to work on, you can continue doing that as well. And if you have a resume review, you'll be in line to do that starting around 6:30. All right, thank you very much.